In this session, we're going to be using ARM to tackle a typical real-world purchasing scenario. Let's assume somebody needs to purchase some PPE, in our case, some masks, for their organisation's factory floor. An optimised procurement process consists of three key stages: raising a requisition, approving the requisition, and handling the resulting purchase order. Along the way, we'll show how ARM addresses each of these steps, but first, let's begin as our everyday user, Maurice. Straight away, we can see that ARM offers several ways for Maurice to log in, and today we'll use the simple username and password format. Once we log in, we're presented with the home screen. On the left, we can view various documents that Maurice has access to, for example, all purchase orders in the system. And within each menu, we can use filters to help us refine the list so that we can more easily find whatever it is that we're looking for. Across the top, we see options for docking the menu, which is handy on smaller screens. We can return to the home page, begin any new document that we have access to, jump back into any recently accessed documents, and to the far right we see our user login, notifications relevant to us, plus some options for help, language settings, etc. In the top center of screen, we see a tasks dashboard, which prompts us about actions and follow-ups. You can think of the task dashboard as a to-do list unique to each user and their assigned roles. Okay, let's create a new requisition. At the top, click Create a New Document, then select Requisition. The new requisition can be named, and now we can begin adding items to our requisition. Let's add something from our internal catalogue. ARM's catalogue doesn't require inventory parts. If your organisation uses inventory in Kinetic, then fantastic, those parts are already made available to you in ARM. But even if your organisation is completely non-inventory, or if you're simply trying to gain control over indirect or non-inventory purchases, you can still use ARM to build and maintain a catalogue, which could consist of just the things that you regularly purchase. By clicking Add, then Catalogue, we'll be presented with our catalogue view. Let's do a search for some masks. Notice that the preferred vendor for this item is defaulted, so Maurice doesn't even have to think about who to purchase it from. It's automatic and may or may not be altered depending on Maurice's level of access. Let's get 10 boxes of these. Click Add Item, and now Finish. This returns us to the main requisition screen, now with its first line added. One of the benefits of using catalogue items here is that the supplier, unit cost, GL account information, applicable taxes, etc. are all defaulting and don't require any input from Maurice. Also notice that if we click the green budget indicator, we can even tell if and what budget is available against this GL account code and how this particular requisition is going to affect that budget if we choose to proceed. We can now submit the requisition, thus triggering the second stage of the process, which is approving the requisition. Notice that Jen's name now appears against the requisition line. Clicking the Workflow button explains why. As you can see, Jen is required to approve this requisition because she's responsible for any requisition raised for a specific location. So this is location approval. We also see that under certain circumstances, such as the value of the requisition, approval might actually escalate to people beyond Jen. Now, Jen was automatically sent an email the moment Maurice submitted his requisition. Jen would click a link provided within the email body, which would bring her directly to her ARM dashboard, ready to assess the incoming requisition. Let's log in now as Jen. And notice that when Jen logs in, her dashboard shows requisitions requiring her approval. Clicking this opens the requisitions menu, and there's our latest requisition on top. We could approve it from the header, but let's open it up and take a closer look. Jen can now see the detail of Maurice's requisition. If the requisition had multiple lines, Jen would be able to approve or decline each line individually, but given we only have a single line in this case, let's go ahead and approve the entire requisition. Note that the requisition is currently in a submitted state, but once we approve the requisition, it moves to an ordered state. This means that not only is the requisition now fully approved, but also in this particular instance, we have configured ARM to automatically generate and even automatically submit the resulting purchase order directly to the supplier without any manual intervention required. Clicking the tracker button at the top right shows us a visual representation of the process thus far. We began with requisition 1028, which then moved through an approval process and ultimately generated purchase order number 4878. This tracker visual is handy because not only does it show us all related documents at a glance, it also allows us to jump between them by clicking on each icon. For example, if I click on the purchase order icon, I can jump directly to the purchase order. Let's do that now. So here's our purchase order. The last step, of course, once the masks physically arrive on location, is to receive the purchase order, and this is as simple as clicking Receive. The order is now closed. Clicking the tracker button once again, you can see that the process of receiving a purchase order generates a receipt line against these masks. Now, this is of particular importance to the accounts payable team because not only do receipt lines serve as a confirmation that goods have been received, but they also provide something for the accounts department to pair incoming AP invoices against. And this is a process known as matching. So in summary, what we have just seen is how quick and simple it is in ARM for a user to raise a requisition, have it approved, and to generate, send, and receive the resulting purchase order. And at no point does the user require access to Kinetic to do any of it. Now let's look at some features which make the process in ARM even quicker and more accurate, beginning with Punchout. Punchout provides ARM users with a direct connection to a supplier's online store and allows them to build a requisition from catalogue items which the supplier maintains. When it comes to raising requisitions, Punchout is going to ensure you're dealing with the most current pricing and in-stock availabilities. This means your users will no longer need to waste time maintaining outdated and inaccurate internal catalogues. Let's use Punchout to create a requisition for some coffee for our head office tea room. Begin a new requisition, naming it if we wish. Now, rather than selecting from our own internal catalogue, let's click Punchout and select Office Depot. This connects us directly to the supplier's live website. Once we're connected, let's do a search for coffee. And add it to our shopping cart. The B2B connection between ARM and this website means that not only will we be leveraging the agreed or contracted pricing between ourselves and this particular supplier, but it also means that when we check out, rather than proceed to the payment page, we actually return to our ARM requisition. And you can see that the cart item appears now as a requisition line, complete with all the necessary detail, prices, product SKUs, and even budget availability. Once submitted, this requisition will then move through ARM's approval and purchase process in the typical manner. So in summary, the big advantage of Punchout is that it puts the onus on suppliers to maintain their own catalogues in real time. So not only does it free up your own team and resources, but it also means that you'll be beginning a requisition using the most up-to-date pricing and in-stock availabilities. In scenarios where a requisition might be considered non-standard, so maybe it relates to a specific kind of purchase, or perhaps additional information needs to be captured before the requisition can be submitted for approval, we can utilize ARM's requisition types. Let's look at the example of a CapEx request. Logged in as Maurice, we begin a new requisition as normal. In the requisition type field, we see that by default, it's set to standard. Maurice can change this to any other requisition type that he has access to, and in this case, he only has the option of a standard requisition type or a CapEx requisition type. When we select CapEx requisition type, you'll notice that the arrow icon turns yellow with a message informing Maurice that this particular requisition type requires additional information before it can be submitted. Clicking the yellow icon opens the accompanying custom form where the additional information for this CapEx requisition will be entered. Some of these fields are mandatory and some are optional. Note that for any requisition type that you create in ARM, the associated custom forms are completely configurable and user-defined. In other words, you decide which fields need to appear here and which are mandatory. Once entered, requisition lines can be added and submitted for approval as normal. Using the requisition types feature in ARM is a great way of categorizing different kinds of purchasing scenarios and mandating the capture of additional information accordingly. Note also that since requisition type is one of the many criteria that can drive approval, it's feasible that in our example, we could have a completely separate and distinct approval path for CapEx-related purchases. Catalogs are useful for helping users quickly find and add items to a requisition, and ARM's catalog supports both goods and services related items. But what about completely one-off purchases which are not part of this catalog? For these scenarios, ARM allows for the adding of miscellaneous requisition lines. Let's take an example of creating a requisition for an IT contractor to come in and repair our server equipment. Begin a new requisition. And this time, we're going to add a non-catalog item. Now, when we do this, we're presented with a screen where we can start entering what we do know about this particular requisition. It's for a server repair. We know the vendor we're going to use, AB Electronics in this case. We know that the category is computer related. And in this case, we may even also know the cost of the service or the repair. Maurice has no idea about GL account, and at the moment you can see that that's blank. However, ARM will use the information he has entered to try to predict the GL account code. When Maurice clicks Save, note that the GL account field automatically populates. Notice also that this particular requisition line, and indeed all requisition lines, whether they're selected from a catalogue or completely miscellaneous, has the option to be attributed to a specific job or project. Let's select Project, @pack 001, phase 01, and the cost code. When I save and return to the main requisition screen, our miscellaneous line appears with all the detail we just entered. Notice that not only was the GL account automatically generated for Maurice in this case, but we can now see available budget against it too. Also, since we assigned this requisition line to a project, we now see a secondary indicator which displays budget specific to that project and phase. Note, however, that it's red, indicating that budget is currently not available for this project and phase. This won't stop Maurice submitting the requisition, but it may be an important factor in the subsequent approval process. Templates are another way of fast-tracking the creation of a requisition, and particularly useful where orders are being repeated and the content of each requisition is mostly the same each time. Under the Templates menu, Maurice can select from a range of templates to begin his requisition. Looking at the Bunzel template, we see a range of requisition lines populated and ready to go. Creating a requisition from this template is as simple as clicking on Requisition at the top right, confirming what detail we wish to use from the template and the location of this new requisition, then clicking Save. A new requisition has now been created. Maurice can now tweak this new requisition for his specific needs this time around. Maybe we don't need the last two lines this time. Maybe we need to adjust the quantity of the first line, but the template has done most of the heavy lifting for us. Of course, we can add additional lines if needed, then submit this requisition, which of course then triggers the approval process as normal. If requisitions are going to consist of exactly the same content each time, it might make sense to have them generate automatically via a schedule, and this is the basis of a standing order. Standing orders will generate automatically once they're activated. The schedule for each standing order determines how often it regenerates a requisition, at what time of the day or week, and over what period this process will be active. Like templates, standing orders can be created in advance, but unlike templates, they'll generate new requisitions automatically with no manual input necessary. If the MRP feature is being used in Kinetic to generate a list of purchase order suggestions, those suggestions are also made visible to you in ARM. Although the list itself is generated by firstly running the MRP process in Kinetic, you can see the resulting list in ARM by clicking the PO Suggestions menu. From here, we can select all or individual lines and launch a new requisition directly from our selection. While PO suggestions can be processed exclusively in Kinetic, there are several scenarios where ARM can be used to provide increased visibility and control over direct spend. The first is in project-based manufacturing, where a level of oversight and approval against a project budget is required. Another scenario may be where the spend is larger than normal, which may in turn impact cash flow and therefore should be subject to review and approval. In both cases, ARM offers a single platform and a consistent user experience for users who need to approve any category of spend. When requisitions are approved, ARM typically generates and sends the purchase order straight away. Pro forma orders are fully approved requisitions which, for whatever reason, are not automatically generated as purchase orders and released to the supplier. Instead, approved requisitions can be left to aggregate until a single consolidated purchase order is manually created and released by a user known as an order creator. This process of consolidation enables ARM to generate fewer, larger valued purchase orders, which could then be used to qualify for volume-based discounts or perhaps meet a supplier's contractual obligations around minimum spend or quantity. As an extension to pro forma orders, ARM also supports the concept of a blanket pro forma order. Blanket pro forma orders are used in scenarios where a contractual spend is approved against a supplier, valid for a specific period of time. Once approved, values can then be released ad hoc against the approved total. This can repeat until either the full amount has been consumed or the valid period expires. Because a receipt line is generated each time an amount gets released, invoice matching is greatly simplified. Used and remaining totals are visible at all times, and with approval, blanket orders can be amended if necessary. And while we've explained the process of purchasing from suppliers in this session today, note that ARM can also be configured to transfer or expense requisition lines before seeking to purchase more from the supplier. So in summary, we've just seen how ARM streamlines and optimizes the procurement process from the very first stage, where requisitions can be easily created or regenerated, even where the user might not know a lot about what it is they're actually requesting. We then saw how ARM automates the process of emailing approvers, and we saw how easily those approvers can perform their duty even from a mobile device. And then lastly, we looked at how easy it is to receive and close purchase orders with a full graphical audit trail clearly displaying all documents related to that purchase. ARM provides full visibility and control over spend management while simultaneously empowering users with a full suite of tools for making their role in the purchasing process simpler and more efficient.